The Battle of Britain, July–October 1940, was a critical moment that prevented Hitler's invasion of Britain and changed the course of the war. Imagine the skies above England filled with the roar of engines, twisting trails of smoke, and the desperate fight for survival waged high overhead. At stake was not just territory or resources, but the very future of Europe. If Britain had fallen, the war's trajectory might have shifted dramatically, and the world as we know it could look entirely different today. This was not only a story of planes clashing in the clouds. It was about a nation under siege, with civilians taking shelter as bombs rained down, and young pilots, many barely out of school, scrambling into cockpits, knowing the odds were stacked against them. For every Spitfire or Hurricane that took off, there were entire teams on the ground making split-second decisions, plotting enemy movements, and coordinating defenses. Victory in this battle was not just about individual heroism. It was about a system of intelligence, innovation, and teamwork that came together in one of history's greatest turning points. At the heart of this triumph was what many have called the genius idea, a revolutionary system that transformed chaos into order, uncertainty into strategy, and turned the tide against overwhelming odds. It was not just about radar, though radar played a key role. It was about how Britain wove together cutting-edge technology, human observation, rapid communication, and decisive leadership into a single integrated defense network. This coordination gave the Royal Air Force the ability to strike at the right place, at the right time, and to conserve its precious resources when they mattered most. What makes this story even more powerful is the human side. Families endured sleepless nights as sirens wailed, children carried gas masks to school, and entire communities rebuilt themselves again and again after devastating raids. Yet through the fear and destruction, there was resilience. Pilots often described the adrenaline of dogfights, but also the quiet moments afterward, exhausted, grieving lost comrades, and preparing to fly again at dawn. And behind the front lines were the unsung heroes. Women of the WWAF plotting aircraft on giant maps, engineers repairing radar stations overnight, and factory workers producing new planes at astonishing speed. The Battle of Britain is remembered not only because it was a military victory, but because it symbolized the strength of a people refusing to surrender. It proved that innovation, unity, and determination could overcome even the most formidable threats. Today, it stands as a reminder that the battles shaping our future are not always won by sheer numbers, but by vision, preparation, and the will to endure. If you find this story as inspiring as we do not forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with others who love uncovering the turning points of history. By supporting us, you help keep these powerful lessons alive for new generations to discover. As the summer of 1940 unfolded, the skies over Britain became a battlefield, and the struggle for air supremacy intensified with each passing week. The Luftwaffe did not simply unleash its fury all at once. Instead, it moved methodically, shifting tactics in calculated phases designed to break Britain's defenses piece by piece. To truly grasp the magnitude of what happened, one must picture not just aircraft soaring above the Channel, but also the immense planning and deadly precision that guided these assaults. At first, the German High Command targeted the arteries of Britain's survival, the shipping routes and coastal convoys that carried essential supplies of food and raw materials. Merchant ships crept along the English coast under constant threat, their crews braving seas littered with wreckage. For the Germans, the plan was clear: sever Britain's lifeline, starve the island, and provoke the Royal Air Force into open combat over the waters where the odds tilted against them. Many sailors and dockworkers lived each day with the grim knowledge that their work placed them directly in the crosshairs of an enemy determined to choke the nation into submission. When that initial assault failed to bring the results Berlin expected, the Luftwaffe shifted its focus inland. From early August, the storm turned toward the airfields and factories that sustained the Royal Air Force. These were not random strikes but carefully chosen targets. Runways that housed precious fighters, hangars filled with spare parts, and workshops where mechanics worked around the clock to repair damaged aircraft. Every attack was meant to cripple the RAF's ability to fight another day. The raids did not only disrupt flight operations but also threatened the very rhythm of production. In places like Woolston and Weybridge, where the Supermarine Spitfires and Hawker Hurricanes were built, bombs reduced factory buildings to rubble. Yet even amid smouldering ruins, workers returned, setting up temporary workshops and refusing to let the assembly lines die. Ordinary men and women became part of this battle without ever setting foot in a cockpit, their determination to keep building aircraft becoming a silent but powerful counteroffensive. The next phase revealed just how deeply the Germans understood the critical role of Britain's unseen defenses. On August 12, their bombs fell not on planes or ports, but on the mysterious structures that dotted the coastline radar stations. These tall towers, often dismissed as oddities by the untrained eye, were in fact the beating heart of a new kind of warfare. They gave Britain something Germany did not have: time. Time to scramble fighters before the bombers arrived, time to direct squadrons to the right altitude, and time to conserve precious fuel. The Luftwaffe believed that by knocking these towers out, they could blind the RAF and open the skies for an unstoppable wave of bombers. For a brief moment, the radar chain was indeed disrupted, but the British response was swift and relentless. Crews worked through the night to restore damaged stations, replacing equipment and reconnecting wires before dawn. The system bent, but it did not break, and every repaired radar tower stood as a quiet triumph of resilience against overwhelming force. Frustrated, the German strategy escalated again, shifting to a far more devastating stage: the targeting of Britain's cities. From September onward, the skies above London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Coventry lit up with fire. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash, and families who emerged from shelters often found themselves homeless within minutes of hearing the sirens. This phase, remembered as the Blitz, was designed not just to destroy infrastructure but to shatter morale. The intent was psychological: to crush the spirit of the British people, to make them demand peace on Germany's terms. For the Luftwaffe, it was a gamble that terror might succeed where precision strikes had failed. Yet the result was the opposite. The shared suffering bound communities together more tightly than before. Fire brigades rushed from one blaze to another, volunteers distributed food and water, and neighbors opened their doors to those who had lost everything. In the glow of burning cities, a stubborn defiance took root. Through each phase, Britain adapted in ways that defied German expectations. The RAF, guided by the integrated system that blended radar, observer reports, and centralized command, managed to stretch its limited resources to the breaking point without letting them snap. Factories struck by bombs found new ways to produce, with workers relocating machinery, improvising parts, and even laboring in open-air yards. Families dug deeper into their resilience, finding strength in Churchill's speeches and in the knowledge that their endurance mattered just as much as the pilots fighting above. The Luftwaffe's calculated strategy, while formidable, underestimated the combination of innovation and determination that Britain brought to the fight. Each stage of the assault told a different story. On the sea lanes, it was the tale of sailors defying submarines and dive bombers. On the airfields, it was the struggle of mechanics and ground crews racing against time to ready aircraft for the next sortie. At the radar stations, it was engineers repairing vital equipment by lantern light after each raid. In the cities, it was the story of civilians who clung to one another as bombs fell, refusing to be broken. What tied all of these stories together was the realization that this was not just a clash of machines, but a test of human endurance and ingenuity. The Luftwaffe came with overwhelming numbers and tactical shifts designed to wear Britain down. But each phase revealed the depth of the nation's resolve. Instead of crumbling under the pressure, the people of Britain found ways to adapt, to rebuild, and to endure, ensuring that the final phase of terror from the skies would not break their spirit, but instead harden their determination to prevail. Amid the thunder of engines and the roar of gunfire that filled the skies over Britain in 1940, strategy was often the difference between survival and annihilation. The Royal Air Force did not simply throw its fighters into battle without thought. Instead, it relied on a carefully calculated system that maximized the strengths of its aircraft and minimized unnecessary losses. At the heart of this method was a brilliant pairing of machines, the sturdy Hawker Hurricane and the sleek Supermarine Spitfire. Each had a role, and together they created a balance that allowed the RAF to stand firm against an enemy that, on paper, vastly outnumbered them. Hurricanes, slower and less agile than the Spitfire, carried heavier firepower and were better suited for breaking apart bomber formations. Their task was brutal and direct: to tear into the lumbering German bombers before they could release their payloads on airfields, factories, and cities, while the Hurricanes hammered away at the bombers. The Spitfires, nimble and fast, danced with the Messerschmitt Bf 100 and nice, engaging the German fighters whose job was to protect their bomber escorts. This division of labor was not born from chance but from necessity, a tactical brilliance that turned two very different aircraft into a complementary shield for Britain's skis. Yet tactics alone could not have carried the RAF through such a relentless struggle. Every decision was weighed against the reality of Britain's limited resources. Pilots were young and often inexperienced. Aircraft production could not keep pace with the rate of losses, and fuel reserves were precious. To fight recklessly, to chase German squadrons across the Channel in the heat of battle, would have been to waste both machines and men in situations that held no strategic value. So instead, the RAF imposed discipline upon itself, resisting the temptation to pursue retreating enemies into hostile skies. It was a restraint that often went against the natural instincts of the pilots, many of whom wanted to press their advantage and strike back with fury. But their commanders knew better. Every fighter that was lost over German-controlled territory was not only a machine gun but a trained pilot unlikely to return. By keeping their battles within range of Britain's airfields, the RAF ensured that damaged planes could glide back for repairs and that downed pilots might parachute safely onto home soil to fly again another day. This discipline became one of the hidden strengths of Britain's defense. German pilots often mocked what they saw as timidity, believing that the RAF's refusal to follow them across the Channel revealed weakness. But in reality, it was an act of quiet defiance, a recognition that survival and sustainability were just as important as raw courage. Each engagement was a matter of endurance, a slow grinding contest where the side that could keep sending fighters into the sky longest would ultimately prevail. For Britain, the conservation of strength was not cowardice, but the very essence of strategy, a calculation that allowed a smaller force to withstand the pressure of a far larger adversary. The pairing of Hurricanes and Spitfires, combined with the refusal to fight on the enemy's terms, created a rhythm to the battle. Waves of German bombers would cross the Channel, their escorts flying in tight formations above, while radar stations fed information into command centers that directed squadrons into the air. Controllers would scramble Hurricanes to intercept the bombers, their pilots bracing themselves for head-on attacks against formations bristling with defensive guns. Above and around them, Spitfires streaked through the clouds to meet the Messerschmitts, engaging in deadly duels that determined whether the Hurricanes would have the space to do their work. It was a dance of machines and men, played out thousands of feet above the ground, where every maneuver could mean the difference between victory and destruction. Pilots who fought in those battles often recalled the intense concentration required, the way the sky seemed to explode with tracer fire, smoke trails, and the sudden flash of burning engines. For Hurricane pilots, charging at a formation of bombers was like running headlong into a wall of gunfire. The bombers flew in tight groups, their gunners firing in every direction, creating a deadly curtain of bullets. Yet breaking those formations was essential, for each bomber that slipped through could deliver devastation to a city below. The Spitfire pilots faced a different challenge, locking horns with German fighters in twisting, high-speed dogfights where skill, reflexes, and a touch of luck determined who survived. It was a battle within a battle, each pilot fully aware that the fate of those below depended on their ability to hold the enemy at bay. Behind this orchestrated system was a command structure that learned quickly from mistakes and adapted to the enemy's shifting tactics. When the Luftwaffe sought to overwhelm defenses by sending massive raids, British controllers adjusted, launching squadrons in staggered waves rather than all at once, ensuring that fresh fighters were always available. When German fighters tried to lure RAF planes into long pursuits over the sea, orders were repeated with stern clarity. Do nice, hold the line, conserve your strength. This discipline was tested again and again, especially when pilots saw their comrades shot down and their instinct urged them to strike back at all costs. But over time, the wisdom of restraint became clear. Every time the RAF resisted the lure of chasing the enemy home, they denied Germany the easy kills it sought. Every time they maintained their strength, they lived to fight another day. This tactical patience, combined with the complementary use of Hurricanes and Spitfires, gradually shifted the balance. The Luftwaffe had entered the battle confident that Britain could be crushed quickly. But as the weeks dragged on, their losses mounted while the RAF remained stubbornly present in the skies. Bombers that were supposed to fly unopposed found themselves harried and torn apart. German fighter pilots who expected dominance discovered instead that the Spitfire could match them, move for move, and all the while, Britain's strategy of fighting over home soil meant that every engagement, no matter how costly, could be replenished faster than the enemy's. In the end, the brilliance of this approach lay not in one daring strike or a single moment of genius, but in the steady, unyielding discipline that turned limited resources into a sustainable defense. The RAF, through its calculated pairing of aircraft and its refusal to waste strength in futile pursuits, transformed what might have been a desperate struggle into a war of attrition it could endure and ultimately win. As the battle for Britain's skies raged on, it became increasingly clear that victory would not be won by tactics alone. However brilliant the coordination of Hurricanes and Spitfires might have been, and however disciplined the RAF was in conserving its strength, those efforts would have faltered without a steady stream of new aircraft to replace the ones that fell in flames over the countryside. Behind the scenes, far from the roar of engines and the smell of burning fuel, another battle was being fought in factories, workshops, and government offices, a battle of production, organization, and morale. At the center of this effort stood Lord Beaverbrook, the Canadian-born press baron turned Minister of Aircraft Production, whose relentless drive and unconventional methods helped tip the balance in Britain's favor. Beaverbrook was not a man bound by traditional rules. When Churchill appointed him, many were skeptical, wondering if a newspaperman could possibly manage the complex machinery of war production. But Beaverbrook brought with him an energy that matched Churchill's own determination, and he understood instinctively that time was the one resource Britain could not afford to squander. Factories that had once produced luxury goods or automobiles were swiftly converted to churn out Hurricanes and Spitfires, often working around the clock. Red tape was slashed, priorities were reordered, and the emphasis was always on speed. Components were standardized, supply lines streamlined, and workers pushed to produce results that few had believed possible. The effect was nothing short of remarkable. At the height of the battle, when German planners believed the RAF must surely be running out of planes, new fighters were rolling off production lines in greater numbers than the Luftwaffe ever anticipated. This surge in production was not only a matter of machinery, but of people. Women stepped into roles they had rarely held before, working in factories, riveting fuselages, and assembling engines with a precision that belied the urgency of their task. Skilled engineers trained newcomers at a frantic pace, while older men and women who had thought their working days behind them returned to contribute. There was a sense that everyone, from the factory floor to the hangar, was part of the same struggle as the pilots who risked their lives daily. Each completed aircraft was more than metal and bolts, it was a lifeline, a symbol of resilience, and a message to those in the skies that Britain would not be broken. But even with planes pouring from factories, a nation cannot endure such a trial without spirit, and that spirit was embodied in the words of Winston Churchill. His speeches, broadcast over the radio and printed in newspapers, were not mere political addresses but calls to the soul of a people under fire. Churchill had a gift for turning hardship into defiance, for framing danger not as despair but as an opportunity to prove greatness. When he spoke of their finest hour, he was not offering empty rhetoric. He was binding the fate of ordinary men and women to a cause larger than themselves. His words reminded the weary and the frightened that the struggle was not in vain, that the sacrifices endured were part of a story that would be remembered long after the bombs stopped falling. The combination of Beaverbrook's industrial drive and Churchill's oratory created a synergy that sustained Britain through its darkest days. On the one hand, the material reality of new planes arriving in squadrons kept the RAF in the fight. On the other hand, the psychological strength provided by Churchill's speeches kept the population from breaking under the strain of nightly raids and daily losses. Families who huddled in shelters during the Blitz emerged to find their homes destroyed, yet still spoke of carrying on. Workers who returned to factories after sleepless nights pushed themselves harder, believing their efforts would make the difference. Pilots climbing into cockpits, aware of how many comrades had failed to return, drew courage from the knowledge that they were not alone, that an entire nation stood behind them. This marriage of production and morale gave Britain a kind of resilience that the Luftwaffe had not anticipated. German strategists believed that sustained pressure from the air would break both the RAF and the will of the people, forcing Britain to negotiate. Instead, every wave of bombers met new squadrons of fighters, and every attempt to terrorize the civilian population only seemed to harden their resolve. For the Germans, it was a campaign designed to exhaust their enemy. Yet they themselves began to feel the weight of attrition, as losses mounted and no sign of collapse appeared. For Britain, it was proof that the unity of purpose between leadership, industry, and people could withstand even the most determined assault. The story of the Battle of Britain is often told in terms of daring dogfights and heroic pilots. But the victory was also forged in the relentless clatter of factories and the stirring words of a leader who refused to yield. Lord Beaverbrook ensured that no matter how many planes were lost, replacements were waiting to take their place. Churchill ensured that no matter how deep the suffering, the flame of defiance never flickered out. Together, they created the conditions under which a smaller, embattled nation could resist a seemingly unstoppable foe. It was a reminder that wars are not won by strength of arms alone, but by the ability to unite every aspect of a society production, leadership, and the unshakable belief that the struggle is worth enduring. And in that unity lay the true genius that kept Britain aloft when the storm threatened to bring it crashing down. While the courage of the pilots, the determination of the people, and the relentless production of new aircraft were vital, The true genius of Britain's defence lay in the unseen system that held it all together. It was not simply a matter of sending fighters into the sky whenever danger appeared, for without guidance they would have been overwhelmed by the sheer size and complexity of the Luftwaffe's raids. Instead, Britain created something the world had never seen before, a fully integrated air defence system that fused together technology, human observation, and centralized command into a single, coordinated network. This was the quiet revolution that turned scattered squadrons and limited resources into a force capable of resisting one of the most powerful air forces in history. The system began with radar, a technology still in its infancy yet already altering the nature of warfare. Along the coast, a chain of tall radar towers scanned the skies across the Channel, detecting incoming formations long before they reached British shores. Each blip on a radar screen represented not just aircraft but a warning, a chance to prepare, and most importantly, time. Time to scramble fighters, time to direct anti-aircraft batteries, and time for civilians to take shelter. Yet radar alone could not provide the full picture, for low-flying aircraft could slip beneath its gaze, and machines were never infallible. That is where the human element entered. Across the countryside, thousands of trained observers kept constant watch, scanning the horizon and relaying what they saw to command posts. Their reports confirmed, corrected, or added to the radar data, ensuring that nothing escaped unnoticed. All of this information flowed inward, converging at command centers where giant plotting tables covered in maps became the nerve center of Britain's defense. Women of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force moved markers across the boards with long poles, tracking the paths of enemy raids and the positions of defending squadrons. Overhead, commanders made rapid decisions, weighing where to send fighters, when to hold them back, and how best to conserve strength while protecting vital targets. In these rooms, chaos became clarity. The movements of hundreds of aircraft, invisible to those on the ground, were transformed into a coherent battle plan that allowed Britain to meet the Luftwaffe not with guesswork, but with precision. This integration extended further still. Anti-aircraft batteries, often seen as separate from the Air Force, were woven into the system, receiving updated information about incoming raids so that their fire could be concentrated and effective. Searchlights probed the night skies in coordination with radar reports, guiding guns and fighters alike. Telephone lines and radio links stitched the entire network together, ensuring that decisions made in command centers could be transmitted instantly to airfields, gun crews, and observation posts. It was, in essence, a living organism, each part dependent on the others, each feeding information and strength into the whole. The brilliance of this system was that it allowed Britain to do more with less. The Luftwaffe entered the battle with numerical superiority, convinced that sheer force of numbers would overwhelm their opponents. But thanks to the integrated network, the RAF did not have to send every plane into the air at once. Instead, they could concentrate their limited squadrons at the right place and the right time, striking at the heart of each raid with maximum effect while keeping reserves ready for the next wave. It was a war of efficiency, of conserving energy while inflicting damage, and the system made it possible. German pilots often remarked on the uncanny timing of RAF interceptions, as if the defenders somehow knew exactly where they would be. In truth, it was not magic but the careful coordination of radar, observers, and command that turned information into decisive action. Beyond its tactical advantages, the system also played a psychological role. For the pilots, knowing that they were not alone, that unseen hands were guiding them toward the enemy and watching over their return, provided a measure of reassurance in an otherwise terrifying ordeal. For commanders, it gave the confidence to make swift decisions, supported by data rather than guesswork. And for the civilian population, the efficiency of the warning system, with sirens sounding in time to seek shelter, gave them faith that they were not entirely defenseless against the storm above. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, lacked such an integrated structure. Their communications were slower, their coordination less refined, and their ability to adapt to shifting situations far more limited. They were powerful but unwieldy, relying on brute strength where Britain relied on speed, flexibility, and foresight. The contrast grew sharper as the battle wore on. Where Germany expected to batter down the RAF through constant pressure, they instead found themselves bleeding strength while their enemy remained stubbornly present, ready, and waiting. This network, later known as the Dowding System after Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, who championed its creation, was perhaps the true genius that won the Battle of Britain. It represented not only a triumph of technology but a triumph of organization and foresight, the ability to harness disparate elements into a single fighting system. It showed that wars in the modern age would not be won solely by machines or men in isolation, but by the integration of both into a coordinated whole, and it set a precedent for future conflicts, where command, control, and information would prove just as decisive as firepower. Looking back, the story of the Battle of Britain is incomplete without recognizing this hidden structure that made victory possible. Pilots in their Spitfires and Hurricanes were the visible heroes, but they were part of a far larger web of defenders. From the radar operators on windswept coasts to the women pushing markers on plotting tables. From the gun crews watching the skies to the telephone operators linking it all together, it was this unity, this seamless merging of human effort and technological innovation, that allowed Britain to withstand the storm. And in that unity lay not just survival, but the foundation of triumph against odds that once seemed insurmountable. Nestled in the gentle rolling fields of Cambridgeshire, Duxford Airfield was far more than a simple collection of runways and hangars. It was the beating heart of Britain's aerial defence, a sector station where every movement, every decision, and every human effort coalesced into a living, breathing network that would prove decisive during the Battle of Britain. To the casual observer, it may have seemed like a quiet, orderly place, but inside the operations block, the reality was a whirlwind of activity, coordination, and split-second decisions, where the fate of the nation often hung in the balance. At Duxford, Hurricanes and Spitfires waited on the tarmac, ready to scramble at a moment's notice. But their success depended entirely on the complex web of people and information that directed them to the enemy. The operations room was the nucleus of this effort, a place where commanders, controllers, and plotters worked in a precise choreography that transformed raw data into actionable intelligence. Here, the observer corps and radar stations fed constant streams of information about incoming raids, tracking not only the number of aircraft but their type, altitude, and direction. The WAF's Women's Auxiliary Air Force personnel played an indispensable role, moving wooden markers across large plotting tables to represent both enemy and friendly aircraft, updating the boards every few minutes to reflect the rapidly changing battlefield. Their work was painstaking, requiring focus, accuracy, and stamina, and it was essential that the controllers above them could trust the information entirely. Each mark, each movement of a block, could mean the difference between intercepting a formation of bombers before it reached a city, or arriving too late to prevent devastation. At the center of the operations room sat the controller, often elevated above the activity below, surveying the situation like a chess player anticipating the next series of moves. Alfred Basil Woodall, one of Duxford's most renowned controllers, understood the stakes as few others did. He spoke directly to the pilots in the air, vectoring them toward the enemy with instructions designed to give the defenders every possible advantage, such as positioning them at higher altitudes or keeping the sun behind them. His decisions required calm under pressure, rapid calculation, and the ability to synthesize multiple streams of information into coherent orders that could be executed instantly. He was aided by a team of assistants and operators, each with their own responsibilities, from scrambling aircraft to coordinating with Army liaison officers who managed anti-aircraft defenses around the base. Every role was interconnected, and any lapse could result in disaster. The observer posts dotted along the southern and eastern coasts of Britain added another layer of vigilance. These men and women, stationed often in isolated locations, scanned the skies for signs of incoming raids, reporting every sighting back to sector stations like Duxford. Their observations, when combined with radar intelligence, allowed controllers to paint a comprehensive picture of enemy movements. This integration of technology and human effort gave the RAF an almost prescient awareness of the Luftwaffe's approach, enabling fighter squadrons to meet their adversaries with precision rather than blind reaction. The Observer Corps, often overlooked in popular accounts of the Battle of Britain, proved indispensable, ensuring that no enemy formation slipped through undetected. The station's command structure was further supported by anti-aircraft batteries and searchlights positioned around the region. Army liaison officers communicated with the operations room, providing real-time information on gun placements and coordinating defensive fire to complement fighter interceptions. Balloon Command, too, played its role by deploying massive tethered balloons to force enemy aircraft to higher altitudes, making bombing runs less accurate and more perilous. Within this intricate system, every human and machine had a purpose, from the pilots gripping their controls hundreds of feet above, to the plotters updating tables in the dimly lit room, to the radar operators monitoring oscillating blips along the coast. Together, they formed a cohesive organism capable of responding to attacks in a matter of minutes. A network that converted scattered warnings into coordinated, effective action. The work at Duxford was relentless. Shifts were long and grueling, often 4 hours on and 4 hours off, with extended periods of duty when raids were frequent or the enemy appeared unexpectedly. The WAFs, controllers, and assistants endured fatigue, the constant roar of aircraft overhead, and the ever-present tension that a mistake could cost lives below. Yet, despite the pressure, a remarkable level of professionalism and discipline was maintained, for every person understood that their efforts were vital to Britain's survival. The operations room was not merely a control center. It was the embodiment of a philosophy that turned information into power, where preparation, observation, and swift decision-making could shape the outcome of the conflict above. Duxford's success also lay in the adaptability of its personnel. No two raids were identical, and controllers had to adjust strategies on the fly, responding to shifts in enemy formations, weather conditions, and the movement of squadrons. The integration of radar, observers, anti-aircraft guns, and command ensured that the station could operate as a single entity, capable of reacting with speed and precision to unpredictable threats. This cohesion transformed what might have been chaos into an organized and coordinated defense, allowing Hurricanes and Spitfires to strike at the enemy with maximum effect while minimizing losses to their own side. By October 1940, as the Luftwaffe's hopes of gaining air superiority crumbled, it became clear that stations like Duxford had been far more than auxiliary installations. They were the lifeblood of Britain's aerial resilience. The combination of cutting-edge technology, meticulous human observation, and the seamless coordination of every available resource ensured that RAF squadrons were at the right place at the right time. Every time, Duxford was a microcosm of the Dowding system itself, a testament to the fact that victory in the Battle of Britain was not merely a product of brave pilots or superior aircraft, but the result of a carefully orchestrated network where every person, every machine, and every decision contributed to the survival of a nation. It was here, in these operations rooms and on the adjacent runways, that the genius of Britain's defense came to life, turning potential defeat into an enduring triumph. When recounting the Battle of Britain, it is natural to envision the pilots of the RAF, silhouetted against the morning sky, engines roaring and bullets tearing through the air, performing feats of courage that have rightly earned them eternal recognition. Yet, to focus solely on their heroics is to see only part of the picture. For the triumph of Britain's skies was built upon the unseen, tireless work of countless individuals whose names rarely appear in history books, whose efforts were just as crucial as those gripping the controls of Spitfires and Hurricanes. These were the unsung heroes, the plotters, observers, anti-aircraft crews, and balloon defense teams, whose meticulous, coordinated labor transformed a collection of brave pilots into a nation-defending force that could stand against the might of the Luftwaffe. Inside the dimly lit operations rooms of sector stations like Duxford, wooden markers were moved with precision on vast plotting tables by the hands of WAFs who had been trained to read and interpret the constant stream of information flowing from radar stations and observer posts along the coast. Every marker represented an enemy formation, a friendly squadron, or the shifting altitude of aircraft in flight, and each movement was vital to maintaining a real-time understanding of the battlefield. The controllers perched above them relied entirely on this information to direct pilots to intercept raids efficiently, avoiding wasteful pursuit over the channel and ensuring that precious aircraft and skilled men were available when and where they were most needed. The work required extraordinary concentration, for even a small error could leave a city vulnerable to destruction or result in unnecessary loss of life among the defenders. Meanwhile, across the countryside, the Observer Corps performed a similarly critical function. From isolated posts overlooking coasts, towns, and fields, men and women scanned the horizon with binoculars, noting every incoming aircraft, its number, type, altitude, and direction. These observations were phoned into the sector stations, providing verification and additional context to radar detections, often facing harsh weather, isolation, and long hours. These observers formed the eyes of Britain, ensuring that no enemy formation could approach undetected. Their dedication allowed the controllers to make informed, strategic decisions rather than reacting blindly, turning potential chaos into coordinated action and giving the RAF the advantage that would prove decisive. Anti-aircraft crews were another essential, though often overlooked, component of Britain's layered defense. Around key cities and industrial targets, batteries of large and small caliber guns were deployed, ready to engage enemy bombers as they approached. Coordinated with radar and observer reports, these crews adjusted fire to the predicted paths of incoming aircraft, sometimes forcing pilots to abandon their bombing runs or disrupt formations, contributing to the larger strategy of attrition that wore down the Luftwaffe. Their work was precise, demanding both technical skill and calm under pressure, and the psychological impact of a sky filled with tracer fire and flak cannot be overstated. For the enemy, the guns presented a constant, unpredictable threat. For the defenders, they were another layer of security woven into an intricate system that maximized every available resource. Adding another dimension to this defensive tapestry were the balloon units, part of Balloon Command, which deployed massive tethered balloons across industrial zones and near critical infrastructure. These balloons forced enemy aircraft to fly higher than optimal bombing altitude, reducing accuracy and increasing vulnerability to anti-aircraft fire. Pilots had to navigate through cables and avoid the hazard of striking the balloons themselves, a task that often disrupted German attack patterns and provided invaluable protection to factories and civilian areas. Balloon crews worked in all conditions. Maintaining the balloons and ensuring their positions were constantly adjusted to meet the shifting threat of enemy raids, a quiet yet essential role in the broader strategy. Together, these components, plotters, observers, gun crews, and balloon units, created a defense that was greater than the sum of its parts. Their efforts allowed pilots to be deployed with surgical precision, engaging enemy aircraft only where necessary and preserving strength for subsequent waves of attacks. The system transformed what could have been a fragmented, reactive response into a dynamic, coordinated network capable of adapting to evolving threats in real time. The courage of the men in the skies was amplified and multiplied by the unseen labor of those on the ground, whose diligence ensured that bravery did not become recklessness, and that every mission had the maximum chance of success. The victory of the Battle of Britain, therefore, was as much a triumph of organization, discipline, and collective effort as it was of individual heroism. The RAF's pilots may have become the iconic figures of resistance, but without the meticulous plotting of markers, the vigilant scanning of the horizon, the disciplined fire of anti-aircraft guns, and the strategic deployment of balloons, the outcome might have been vastly different. Every person involved, whether moving a block on a table, calling in a sighting, loading a gun, or adjusting a tethered balloon, played a part in the delicate and sophisticated machinery that kept Britain in the fight. In remembering the Battle of Britain, it is essential to see it as a collective achievement, a story of interconnected efforts where technology, human observation, and sheer determination coalesced into a force capable of defying an enemy that seemed invincible. The pilots' courage inspired the nation, but the unsung heroes on the ground ensured that inspiration could be transformed into tangible results, that strategy could be executed with precision, and that every life and aircraft was valued and protected to the fullest extent possible. Their combined efforts created the conditions for survival and ultimately for triumph, a testament to the power of unity, coordination, and perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. By October 1940, the skies over Britain were filled with the remnants of a battle that had tested the nation to its very limits, a confrontation that would come to define not only the course of the Second World War, but also the resilience, ingenuity, and determination of a people determined to survive against overwhelming odds. The Luftwaffe, despite months of relentless bombing and aerial assault, had failed to achieve what Hitler had considered essential for an invasion: air superiority. The British people and their defenders had withstood a campaign that was as psychological as it was physical, proving that courage and coordination, when combined with ingenuity and strategic planning, could defy even the most formidable of foes. The victory was not merely the result of individual heroics in the air, although the bravery of the pilots remains legendary. It was the product of a deeply integrated system that brought together radar technology, the tireless observation of the observer corps, the precision of anti-aircraft crews, the vigilance of balloon defense units, and the meticulous coordination of controllers and plotters in operations rooms across the country. Each person played a crucial role, and each role mattered. From the WAF's moving markers across plotting tables in dimly lit rooms to the controllers directing pilots toward enemy formations with calm precision, every action contributed to the orchestration of a defense that was greater than the sum of its parts. The Dowding system, named after Air Chief Marshal Ho Dowding, had proven its worth by integrating detection, communication, and rapid response. It allowed Britain to maximize the effectiveness of scarce resources, concentrating fighters where they were most needed, conserving strength, and ensuring that pilots were deployed in situations where they had the highest chance of success. The system turned potential chaos into coordinated action, enabling the RAF to intercept the Luftwaffe with uncanny timing, striking not by chance but through the disciplined execution of strategy. It was a combination of foresight, technological innovation, and human diligence that allowed a small island nation to stand firm against a seemingly unstoppable force. Beyond the mechanics of defense, the Battle of Britain demonstrated the power of morale and unity. Winston Churchill's speeches, broadcast across the nation, inspired confidence and resolve, reminding citizens of what was at stake and why every effort mattered. Communities endured the Blitz, emerging from shelters to rebuild what had been destroyed, supporting one another through loss and fear, and maintaining the indomitable spirit that the enemy had hoped to break. In the air, pilots drew strength from the knowledge that their actions were part of a larger, coordinated effort, that they were supported by a network of unseen allies working tirelessly to ensure their success. The battle, therefore, was as much a struggle of spirit and determination as it was of planes and guns. The legacy of the Battle of Britain extends far beyond the immediate survival of the nation. It established principles of integrated defense that would shape military strategy for decades to come, highlighting the importance of coordination, intelligence, and rapid response in modern warfare. The contributions of those who worked behind the scenes, the plotters, observers, anti-aircraft crews, and balloon units, set a standard for operational excellence and teamwork, proving that wars are not won by heroics alone but by the meticulous organization and collaboration of many. Their sacrifices and dedication remain a reminder that every role, no matter how invisible it may seem, has the power to influence the outcome of history. As we reflect on this pivotal moment, it is clear that the Battle of Britain was more than a military engagement. It was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. It showed that even in the darkest hours, a nation can harness its collective strength, its courage, and its intellect to overcome threats that at first seem insurmountable. The story of Duxford, the operations rooms, the radar stations, and the countless individuals who contributed to the defense illustrates that victory often depends on the seamless integration of technology and human effort, on preparation and adaptability, and on the unwavering belief in a cause greater than oneself. To all those watching today, the Battle of Britain offers lessons that extend beyond military history. It reminds us of the power of unity, the importance of preparation and innovation, and the extraordinary outcomes that can be achieved when individuals work together toward a common goal. Every observer who scanned the horizon, every plotter who moved a block on a table, every pilot who took to the skies, and every citizen who endured the Blitz played a part in a story that continues to inspire. Their collective courage and commitment ensured not only the survival of Britain, but the preservation of hope for the entire world at a time when it seemed that darkness might prevail. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through one of history's most remarkable moments. If you have enjoyed this deep dive into the ingenuity, bravery, and resilience that defined the Battle of Britain, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story that explores the extraordinary events and people who shaped our world. Every click helps us continue to bring history to life. And together, we can keep the lessons and legacies of the past alive for generations to come. The skies of 1940 may be far behind us, but the ingenuity, courage, and teamwork that defended them remain timeless. A beacon of what can be achieved when determination meets strategy, and a reminder that every role, no matter how unseen, can make history